Can you hear me? Well, I'll just have to gather my wits about me because I haven't really had time to think. A man was travelling down the highway for a few minutes when he got a phone call on his cell phone. It was his wife. She said, "Oh, Bert, do be careful," she said. "I've just heard on the news that there's an idiot driving wrongly down the highway." Bert says, "There's not just one, there's hundreds of them." An American soldier had been in the fighting zone, and now he was going for a bit of R&R. He boarded a train that was going towards London, but all the seats were occupied except one by an elderly, well-dressed woman, but there was a little dog sitting on the seat. So he said to the woman, "Ma'am, do you mind if I sit on this seat?" And the woman looked down her nose at him and she said, "Can't you see my little Fifi's sitting there?" So he went further up the train to look for a vacant seat, and of course there wasn't one. So he came back to the woman and he said, "Ma'am," he said, "I'd like to sit in this seat if you'll move your dog." And she said, "Oh, you Americans are all alike." She said, "You think you can do just what you want." She says, "Haven't I told you my little Fifi is sitting here?" So without another word, the American soldier picks up the little dog and throws it out of the window. The woman shrieks and jumps to her feet and demands that somebody should save her from this wicked man. An elderly English gentleman who is sitting across the aisle leans towards the American and says, "Young man, you Americans are all alike. You seem to have the perchance for doing the wrong thing. You eat with your fork in the wrong hand. You drive your automobiles at the wrong side of the road. And now you've thrown the wrong bitch out of the window." Two men are having lunch together in a cafe. The waitress comes up and she says, "What would you like?" One of them says, "I'd like a quickie." The waitress says, "Sir, I don't know you and I don't want to know about your personal life. I'll come back again when you've decided what you want to eat." The man turns to his friend and he says, "What was all that about?" The friend says, "It's pronounced quiche."
Gotta have light. That'll be all right, I think. Yeah, that's
The
okay.
CIA had an opening for an assassin. After all the preliminary tests and the medicals, there were just 3 people who were there for the final test. 2 men and 1 woman. The agent sat behind the desk and he said, "Send one in." So the first man comes in and so he says to him, "Now you see that door over there on the other side of the room? Well, behind that door your wife is sitting in a chair. I want you to go in there and kill her." And he gives him a gun. The man looks at the gun and he looks at the agent and he said, "I can't do that. I can't kill my wife." So the agent says, "Well then you're no good to us, so you might as well go." So the next one comes in, it's the man. So he says the same to the man. He said, your wife is sitting in a chair behind that door. Go in and kill her. And he gives him the gun. So the man walks slowly in, opens the door, goes into the room, and for quite a while. Then the door opens and he comes out, and tears streaming down his face. He says, I can't do it. I can't kill my wife. He says, I love her. So the agent says, oh, well, you are no good to us then. You go home and take your wife with you. Next, it's the woman's turn. So, he says the same to the woman. He says, your husband is sitting in a chair in a room behind that door. You go in and kill him. So he gives her the gun. She takes the gun, she goes into the room, and then they can hear 2 shots fired, and then suddenly there's banging and crashing and screaming, till suddenly there's silence. After a minute or so, the door opens slowly. Out comes the woman, mopping her brow. She goes up to the desk, drops the gun on the desk in front of the agent, and she says, that gun was loaded with blanks. I've had to kill him with a chair. Waiting to enter the kingdom of heaven. St. Peter said, well, I can't let you in until you each answered one question. So he turns to the first woman and he said, who were the first couple to live on earth? She says, Adam and Eve. He says, that's right, you can go in. So it says to the other woman, where did Adam and Eve live? And they said, she said, in the Garden of Eden. So he said, that's right, you can go in. The third woman was a nun. So he says to her, now yours is going to be more difficult. What did Eve say when she first saw Adam? She thinks for quite a while, and then she says, oh, that's a hard one. St. Peter says, that's right, you can go. What was the other one now? Oh yeah. There's a drunken man is on his way home when he comes across a baptismal service on the river bank. He staggers down to the river and walks straight into the water and stands next to the preacher. The preacher turns and sees him and says, have you come to find Jesus? The drunken man says, yeah, I sure have. So the preacher dunks him under the water and brings him back up and says, have you found Jesus? The man says, no, I haven't. So the preacher dunks him under the water again and leaves him a second longer and brings him back up and says, now, have you found Jesus? The man says, no, preacher, I have not. By this time the preacher is getting a bit annoyed, so he dunks him under the water again and leaves him for longer again and brings him back up and says, now, my man, have you found Jesus? The man coughs and splutters and wipes the water from his eyes and says, "Are you sure this is where he fell in?" Do you want some more? And some of you will have heard it before, but be sure to wait for the punchline. Jack is moderately successful in his business, but he is hampered by terrible headaches. He's been to one doctor and another, but nobody could tell him what was causing these terrible headaches, until finally one doctor says, "Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. The good news is I've found out what's causing your bad headaches. The bad news is you'll have to be castrated. You see, your testicles are pressing up against the base of your spine, and that's what's causing your bad headaches." Well, Jack was stunned. He didn't know what to think, but he knew he couldn't carry on with these bad headaches, so he decided he'd have to have the operation. Afterwards, when he came out of hospital, he was feeling so depressed because he felt as though he was only half a man now. One day he was walking down the high street, and as he was passing the man's outfitters, he looked in the window and he said, "Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll buy myself a new suit. That might make me feel better." So he went into the shop, and the assistant came up to him and said, "Yes, sir, what can I do for you?" And the man said, "I'd like to buy a new suit." So the assistant looked at him and he said, "Yes, size 46 chest, 31 leg." And Jack said, "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" The man said, "It's my job." So he goes and gets him a suit, and Jack tries it on and is pleased with it, and he decides he'll buy it. And then the man says, "How about a new shirt to go with it?" And Jack says, "Oh yes, why not?" The man looks at him, he said, 16.5 neck. Jack says, "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" He said, "It's my job." Then he said, "How about some new shoes?" And Jack said, "Why not? Sure." So the man looks at his feet, he says, "Size 12, white fitting." Jack says, "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" The man says, "It's my job." Then he said, "How about a new hat?" And of course, by this time, Jack's on a roll, and he says, "Sure, why not?" Man looks, he says, "Size 7 1/8. And Jack says, "Yes, that's right. How did you know?" He says, "It's my job." And then he said, how about new underpants?" And Jack says, "Well, why not?" So he looks at him, he says, "Size 36. Jack laughs, he says, "Oh, you're wrong there." He said, "I've been wearing a size 34 ever since I was 18. And the man says, No, a size 34 would be too small. It would cause your testicles to press up against the base of your spine. And you would have one hell of a headache."